In the last part, you learned how to load the application assets. Now we are going to dive into designing the app, and we are going to start with the home page. When you first open the app, you'll see the login page where you enter your credentials. I'm just going to enter my credentials, and then you click the sign in button. Now, since we have not set up the database yet, I'm just going to use some existing credentials to log into the app. And here you get the home page. At the top, we have the navigation bar where we have the search. We have here the notifications and also the user settings or the user profile section. On the left, we have the navigation items. On the right, we have two sections. We have the people you may know and also the trends for you. And here in the middle, we have the section where you get to create stories or view other stories. And also in here, you can create a status. So we are going to start with the home page. We are going to first set up the designs with just some dummy data. And then we are going to connect our app to the database and send and get data from an actual SQL database. This is how our app looks at the moment. So let us go to Visual Studio. We are going to clean up the existing solution and we are going to work on the top section of the app. The first thing that we need to do in here is that we need to clean up the main page where we load all the navigation items and where we are going to load the application content. And we have said that that file is the layout.c# HTML, which you can find in views, shared, and then layout file. Let me just close the Solution Explorer so I have more coding space. And then in here, you can see that we have the navigation bar. So we have the header. Here we have the nav bar. Then down here, we have a div. Inside this div, we have a main tag. And then inside the main tag, we have the render body, which is this section or the placeholder where all the data and all the views get rendered inside this file. Then we have a footer. And in our app, we could see that we didn't have a footer. So what I'll do is I'll just remove the footer. And here, the first thing that I'll do is I'm just going to remove the header because we want to redesign this section. And then I'm going to also remove the div and the main. Instead, I'm going to create another div. And this div is going to have the ID wrapper. I'm going to put the render body inside here. And then you could see that in our app, we had two navigation sections or two bars, let's say the top bar and also the sidebar. So the one on the left. Now in here, we are going to create the top bar or the header of the app. And if I go back to the app, you can see that here on the header, if we think of the header as a div, we are going to have multiple divs inside, let's say a main div. One is going to be used to show the icon here on the left and also the text. We are going to have an input, which we are going to use to search. And here on the right, we are going to have two other sections, one for the notifications and another one for the profile section. Another important thing to mention in here is that if you are working on a different screen, so I'm just going to enlarge this one, you can see that in here we get this burger icon, which if you click, we are going to get the navigation items. So let us go back to Visual Studio. And here the first thing that I'll do is that I'm going to add some classes or some Tailwind classes to the header. And these classes are going to make the header fixed, full width, a top bar with a high Z index, a blur background, and a bottom border using flagbox to align its items. Now inside the header, we are going to add our first div. And then inside this div, we are going to have another div, which we are going to use for this section on the left, which is for the icon and also for the burger menu. And then we are going to have another div. And this div is going to be used for the section on the right, which has the search and the header icon. So inside here, we're going to have the search. We are going to have the notification icon. And then we are going to also have the profile icon. Now, the first thing to do in here is let us make sure that the main div is going to be adjustable for different screen sizes, so to XL or large. For that, I'm going to use these other classes, which is to XL, and then it's going to use this width, which is defined in a CSS file. And for large screens, it's going to set this width. Now inside the first div, I'm just going to use these classes, and this class basically makes the elements a flex container, centers its items, and adds a small gap between them, which is defined by this gap 1. Here we're going to have a button, and this button is basically going to trigger the menu item whenever we have like a small screen. So basically this button is going to toggle the sidebar, which is a flex container centering its content. It has a fixed size, a large text, rounded corners, a hover background change, and hides on extra large screens with icons that switch the visibility based on the button's state. And other than the button, we have seen that we have an icon or the application logo. We are going to put that inside another div, and this div is going to have an ID of logo and a class of flex and items center. Inside here, we are going to have an A tag. We want to use an A tag because whenever we click on the icon or on this logo, we want the users to be redirected to the home page. Now here, we are going to just add the same class, so class flex items center, and then we are going to load an image. Let us define the source, which is inside the images, and then logo.png. And you can optionally set in here the width, let's say W-10, and then MD block, and then hidden. We are going to also add a span after this image, and this is going to be the application name, which is circle app. You can add a margin to the left by using class and then ML-2, so 2 units of margin to the left. So this is all for the first part. Now on the second part, or on the second section of the navigation bar, we have 3 subsections. We have the search, we have the header icons, where we have basically the notification icon and also the profile icon. For that, in here, the first thing to do is that we're just going to add in here class and then flex-1 and then relative. And this div basically takes up the remaining available space of the flex1 within a flex container and is positioned relatively. And here, optionally, if you want, you can also define another div. And inside this div, you can define, let's say, the maximum width. And in here, you can also define if you want to center the items. Now, inside here, we are going to add the form, going to be used for the search. This is going to have an ID, let's say, search box, and it's going to have some Tailwind classes. And these Tailwind classes basically just set the elements width to 680 pixels on extra large screens. It sets it to 96 pixels on small screens, makes it relatively positioned on small screens, gives it round corners, hides overflow content, sets a high Z index, gives it a secondary background color, hides it on medium screens and smaller, and makes it full width, positions it to the left, and fixes its position with a top margin on extra small screens. Now inside the form, we are going to have 2 sections or 2 subsections. The first one is going to be the search icon, and the second one is going to be an input, which has the type text. We can set a name, let's say query, and it also has a placeholder, which says, let's say, search posts or friends. We are going to add some Tailwind classes to make this element full width, add extra padding on the left, set the normal font weight, make the background transparent, and set a height of 12 units and use the small text size. Now that we have all this set up, we are going to create now the notification icon section and also the profile icon. For that, let us create another div inside here, div. And here I'm going to use some other classes, which basically just make the element a flex container with centered items, add a larger gap between the items on small screens, and positions them absolutely at the right with a top alignment, vertically centers it, and sets the text color to black. And inside here, for each section, we're going to have a button, which is going to have the icon. And this button is going to trigger a div. So a button div for notification and also for profile, we're going to have a button and a div. You can define in here the type if you want, optionally as button to both of them. And then I'm going to add some CSS classes. These classes just add padding on larger or small screens, make the element fully round, positions it relatively, and applies a second background color on smaller screens. Now we have the button. Inside this button, we are going to define or we are going to use an icon. Now to use an icon, you can either use or import a library, and we are going to do that for the ion icon, or you can use an SVG. Now, depending on the SVG that you want to use, you can navigate to this svgviewer.dev, and then in here search for ring, let's say bell. Click here, copy this text and paste it inside the button. I already have the SVG that I want to use, so I'm just going to copy it and paste it in here. Then after the SVG, we want to have an indicator, which we are going to use to show the number of notifications. For that, we're going to create another div where we're going to give some custom classes and set a default value of 0. I paste in here. You can see that I have a div. I have the absolute, that top right to 0, and some other CSS classes. I have set an ID of notifications count, and the value is 0. So this is the button. Now we want to also design the div section of the notifications button. And we are going to start with just a class which sets this to hidden. And what this does is that whenever you load the app, this is going to be by default a hidden div. So then we can add some JavaScript code in the future parts. When you click the icon, you get the notifications. I'm going to use some more CSS classes. And these classes basically set the background color to white. They add a right padding of 1.5 units. They make the element rounded with a large radius, applies an extra large drop shadow, and sets the width to 365 pixels on medium screens, makes it full width on smaller screens, and applies a border style. Now, other than the default classes, we're going to use the UI kit to add some more styles, like for example, the offset, the position where we want to show this div, the mode, like how does this div get triggered, and the animations as well. Now, inside here, so when you click this icon, you can see that we have a heading which says notifications, and then inside here we display all the notifications. So we are going to just add the heading and the other div, which is going to be used to list all the notification content. So in here, let's create a div, and this div is going to have some other classes, and these classes make the element a flex container, center its items vertically, distributes space between them, adds a small gap between items, and applies padding on all sides with extra padding on the bottom. And then in here, I'm just going to have an h3 tag. I'm going to set the text to be notifications. And then this h3 tag is going to have the classes font bold and text extra large. The other div, so we have the main div, we have the header, then we're going to have a div for the notification body. In here, we're going to have other classes that set the text size to small, gives the element a height of 400 pixels, makes it full width, allows vertical scrolling if content overflows, and adds a right padding of 2 units. And then inside here, we're going to have one last div, which we're going to use to show the actual content. And since now we don't have any data, we can just show in here no notifications. Let's save the changes. And here I'm just going to format the code using Ctrl+KD. And then I'm just going to start collapsing all these sections to see if I have created everything as it needs to be. So we have said that inside the main div, we are going to have just 2 divs, the first one and the second one, which inside has a search bar and all the other items. If I collapse this div and then collapse this one, you can see that we have the 2 sections. Now inside this other div, we're going to create another div with the same class for the most right section, which is the profile section. For that, let me just copy this part, div. This is going to be for the profile, and I can remove the search. Let us just close the div, and now we're going to write some code. Now inside this section, we're going to have two divs. The first div is going to be used to load the user profile picture. And then we're going to have another div, and this one is going to be used to display the options like settings, the logout button, and my account. So we have this div, and let me just press in here Ctrl+K+D to format the divs. So we have this div. I'm just going to add some classes to this div. And these are the classes. And this class basically just creates a flex container with centered items, larger gaps on smaller screens, absolute positioning at the right, vertically centered using the top 1, 2, and also the minus translate y 1, 2, and black text. So now inside here, we're going to have the div, first div, and then we're going to also have a second div. As we said, the first div is going to be used for the profile picture. So here I'm going to add some picture related classes. So for example, make it round, and then the cursor needs to also be a pointer. So here we're going to have an image. And then since we don't have a placeholder image, I'm just going to download an image from the internet. I'm going to put it inside the root folder. So for that, I'll just go to the Solution Explorer. I'll go to Images, right click, then add a new folder. I'm going to name it just Avatar. Then just right click, let's say Open Folder. So it's empty, but if I go to Desktop, I have already downloaded a user placeholder. Or maybe I'll just name it User. Ctrl X, I'll just go back and paste it in here. Now let us go back to the solution, and here let us define the source. And the source is going to be inside the root folder. We have images, we have avatars, and then we have user.png. Let me just verify. It's avatar and then user.png. So let me just remove the extra S from here. We are going to also define some classes. So we set kind of like a height, a width, and also we make sure that it has some shadow and also it's round. So I use these classes. Then I'll just save the changes and let us move to the next div. Now in this div, similar to the other div, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to define this as a hidden div. And by defining this hidden, what this means is that this is going to show up only when you click the profile picture. I'm going to also define some other classes for the shadow and also a border style. And optionally, if you want, you can also define some UI kit settings like the offset, where you want this div to show. And we have defined in here bottom right. And if you want to have an animation. Then inside this div, we are going to have an A tag. The A tag is going to be the profile picture. And when we start adding functionality, what we're going to do is that you can click on this A tag and you will be redirected to the user profile or your profile. Then inside this A tag, I'm going to have another div where I'm going to define some padding and also some gap and also center the items inside this div. Inside here, we're going to have an image. So let me just copy the image from up here, paste it down here. I'm going to remove this extra character from here. The only thing that I'll change is that I'm going to change the width to be 10 on smaller screens. Height is going to be 10. And then this is going to be, let's say, round full and shadow. A round full. I'm going to remove the W and 7. Shadow, and I can remove the shrink 0. Then just after the image, we are going to add a div. And in this div, I'm going to add the class flex1. So this basically takes the rest of the screen. So the rest of the screen on the right. So we have the div. On the left, we're going to have the image. On the right, we're going to have the flex1, where we can display, let's say, we can display the full name, and we can also display the username of the logged in user. For that, we can create an h4 tag. This h4 can have some classes like font medium, text black, and for now I'm just going to hardcode my full name, so Ervis Trupja. And then I'm going to have a div, and this div is going to have some other classes which define the text type and also the text color. And then I'm going to have a default value, let's say Ervis Trupja. Ctrl KD to format the code. Then after we have the profile picture, you can see that we have an HR, so a horizontal line, we have my account and logout. Let us create these. So in here, I'm just going to add an HR. Then after this HR, I'm going to create a navigation tag. And inside the navigation tag, I'm going to have two A tags. One is going to be for my account. And here we can add some custom classes. And this class just creates a flex container with standard items, a gap of 2.5 units, which changes the background color to secondary when you hover the mouse. And then it adds a padding of 2 units and a 2.5 units on the left and on the right, and applies the round corners. Now, after the A tag, we're just going to have an icon, and this icon is going to be the settings outline. I'm just going to give it a name, my account. Then let us just create another A tag, but before we create this A tag, let us add an HR. And then I'm just going to copy this A, paste it down here. I'm going to change the name of the icon to exit outline, and then the value is going to be logout. So this is all we need to do. And as you can see, this is a lot of code, but this is just so we set up the app. On the upcoming parts, we're going to write less code and we're going to write more logic about the application. But we have, of course, to create the initial and the most important piece of UI, which is the navigation bar. Then we're going to create the sidebars. And after that, we're going to work on some C# code. We're going to learn how to pass data, how to navigate between pages, and much more. Now, to see if everything works as expected, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save the changes and then click this play button here. Now in here, we can see that when we run the app, we don't get the expected result, because in here we need to have like the icon here on the left, we need to have the search bar here on the middle, and then on the right, we need to have the notifications icon and also the profile picture. We don't get that, so let us close the browser and let's go back to Visual Studio and see if we have placed everything where it needs to be. So in here, I'm just going to collapse everything. And for that, I can use the Ctrl-ML. This is going to collapse everything in here. So let's start opening them up. We have body. Inside here now we have the div ID wrapper. And here we have the top bar. So the top bar is basically the header. And then inside the header, we have a div, but as you can see, we have a single div, and we have said that the header needs to be 2 divs, the left section which has the icon and also the application name, and the right section which has the search or the input and also the notifications. So let me expand this one, and we can see that inside here we have both the gap one and also the flex one relative. That I just cut and paste this outside. So now we have 2 divs. The first one just has, if I expand the first one, it has just the button, which is for the hidden menu icon. So when the screen is basically too small. And it also has the logo. So this is okay now. The second div, on the other hand, does have 2 divs. And the way this should work is that the first div needs to have the search and the second div needs to have the icons. So if I open the first one, you're going to see in here that we have the form, but we also have the div for the notifications. So that's something that we need to change. We are going to have both, so form, we are going to have both notifications and also the profile on this other div. Press enter. This is the profile div, the profile section div. Let me just go and copy from here. Just notifications. Going to copy the notification section, so the button and also the div X, so Control X to cut it. I'm going to remove this part. I just paste it in here. Let us save the changes. And now let us run the app one more time. We see we have some errors. So it looks like we are missing something on line 38. We have the input, so we have the form. Close the form. So let's just close the form. Let's run the app. We can see that now we have the title. We have the input. We have the right section in here, but as you can see, when you hover your mouse on the notifications, this looks good, so notifications. But when you go to the profile picture, it does look like this. And other than that, it looks like some styles are being overridden. And that's right, because we are using both the Tailwind classes, but we have not disabled Bootstrap yet. So let us go and fix the hover effect. And also we are going to fix the Bootstrap issue. So let me just close the browser. Bootstrap is really easy. Just scroll up to the head. Here, just remove Bootstrap. Now let us scroll to the bottom. Let's open this div. And you can see in here that we have this A tag. What we need to do is that inside this div, we are going to have an A tag. Then we are going to have an HR. And then we are going to have a navigation. But as you can see, we have put everything inside this A tag. That's why everything looks kind of messy and everything looks like a clickable link. But let's start with the image. So we have an A tag. Inside the A tag, we are going to have the div. Inside this div, we are going to have the image. And then inside the same A tag, we're going to also have this div. But let us first fix the width. So let's not make this just for small devices, but for all devices, this is going to be 10. And then 10. We are going to have the div. And now after the A tag, we are going to have an HR. Control X. Paste it down here. And then we are going to have the nav. I'm just going to cut and paste it down here. So you can see we have an image, we have the div, the A section is complete. Now inside the nav, as you can see, we are applying flex classes to an A tag, and that's not right. We need to apply them to a div. So inside this A tag, let us create a div. This is going to have just this class. Paste it, copy the icon, paste it here, save the changes. Let's do the same for this other one. I'm just going to create a div. I'm just going to add a class. I'm just going to add all the classes and cut and paste it in here. Save all the changes. Let us run the app one more time. Now, as you can see, if I hover in here, we have everything we need. The only problem or the issue that we currently have is that we do not have the icons for the search. We don't have an icon for my account and also for logout, which means that the tags icon are not working as expected. Now, the reason why these don't work is because we are trying to use an icon, but we have not imported a library for the icon. So what we are going to do is that we are just going to scroll down in here. And then after we have the asset scripts, we are going to load the ion icon, Ctrl+KC to add a comment. And I do already have the links, so I'm just going to paste them in here. And now I'm just going to save the changes. Now, if you want to get the same link, you can just navigate to cdnjs.com and then search in here for ionicons. Click in here. And then from here, you can copy any link that you need to use. Just going to close the browser. I'm going to save the changes. I'm going to run the app and I'm going to see if everything works as expected. Now you can see that here on the search, we have the icon. Here, we also have the icons as well. Now this is all for this part. I know it's quite a long part, On the next one, we're going to design the left navigation bar.